Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1980 giallo film Dressed to Kill, and yes, I watched it on the Criterion Collection Blu-ray. I did not dive in yet to the special features on here. This was my first time watching Dressed to Kill, and the reason I decided to do it now is because, well, A, I love giallo, so I was going to get to it sooner rather than later. The other thing is the day before I watched this, I had just watched De Palma's Carrie for the very first time, so I'm releasing these reviews on the same weekend, so it is double dose of De Palma. Yes, I didn't like this one as much as Carrie, but they're obviously very different films, but still really enjoyed this. In fact, this actually cracked my top 10 giallo films of all time, and I've seen around 60 at this point, and I'm still going, so yeah. One of the main reasons being how this looks. If you know De Palma's style, it's amazing. It's really amazing. So the film, obviously written and directed by Brian De Palma, who also did Phantom of the Paradise, which is phenomenal. I have a review for that. Carrie, which I now have a review up for that. Blowout, Scarface, Body Double, The Black Dahlia, Carlito's Way, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of films. Wonderful style. Love De Palma. So De Palma apparently followed his father around with recording equipment when he was younger at behest of his mother because he was trying to figure out if he could catch his father cheating. Apparently his mother suspected his father was cheating and he went around with recording equipment. So that was the seed for the script for this film. That and the fact that he wanted to direct the film Cruising, which was about a serial killer killing gay men in the village, I think in the village in New York. And he wrote up a script for Cruising, but he ended up not getting attached to that project, and instead it went to William Friedkin, known jackass William Friedkin. Um, and yeah, so it would be interesting to know what Cruising would be in De Palma's hands. I haven't seen the Friedkin version. I don't know if I will, but put it in the comments. Is it worth watching? I would check it out, even though I hate Friedkin. But you know, it was interesting, though, going back to what I originally said, that the impetus for the creation of this script for Dress to Kill was Brian De Palma actually going around and following his father. So I assume that the character of Peter is kind of based on De Palma when he was younger. I don't know if he got into all that, electronics and tech stuff, but yeah. And I like that aspect of the film. I love that aspect of the film, actually. It's very cool. The role of Liz Blake was actually written for Nancy Allen, who was Brian De Palma's wife at the time. One of the producers actually wanted to cast Suzanne Summers for that, but De Palma fought it and was like, no, I specifically wrote this role for Nancy Allen. And I'm glad Nancy Allen was in it as Liz. I think she did a great job. But also Angie I think Dickinson is her name. Angie Dickinson did a really good job as Kate. And having those two roles acted extremely in a strong manner was very important for this film, and they were. It was excellent. Originally, this film was actually rated X for the nudity, and you can see, especially when you're watching the Criterion version, lots of nudity with the shower scenes mainly. So much so that they go all the way below the waist with Kate. I don't think they go below the waist with Liz, but with Kate they do. So it was rated X, but De Palma was able to negotiate down with the MPAA to a final rating of R. And this is one of the most interesting things I found. Sean Connery was originally offered the role of Dr. Elliot, Dr. Robert Elliot, and I'm glad they went with Michael Caine because I think Michael Caine did an excellent job. And I just can't see Sean Connery in that role. I really can't see him in it. Now, he ended up turning it down, not because he wasn't interested, but because he had scheduling conflicts. So I'm glad that ended up being the case because I thought Caine was perfect for this role. He did such an excellent job. And I just, like I said, I don't know what it would have been with Connery as Dr. Elliot. So the opening scene is all about sexuality. As Kate caresses herself in the shower, you like how I'm like feeling myself up while I'm doing that? I'll keep doing it while I talk about it. No, that's too weird. So she's caressing herself in the shower as she then becomes kind of felt up from behind. It plays like it's a fantasy that she's visualizing, and then it cuts over to the very boring missionary sex with her husband. So it played to me like that was the fantasy playing in her head, the stuff in the shower, while she's having sex with her husband in order to kind of enjoy it more. Now, she says later to Dr. Elliot when she's in a session with him that, it's boring sex basically. So that kind of sheds more light on this opening scene. So you can see she feels like she's in a relationship where she can't express herself the way she wants to sexually, so she's having these fantasies. She's very repressed from a sexual standpoint, and that's the whole focus of her character, basically. Obviously, on the other side, the duality in this film, which is, I think, is also why there's a lot of split screen, is Liz, who's obviously owning her sexuality at this point. She's not repressed. She's actually made it a living. She's making money doing it. And she even says, she's not just doing it for work. She has sex with men she's attracted to in addition as well. So she's just the total opposite of Kate, which is why you have these two characters in the film. They're polar opposites, basically. Based on Kate's time with Dr. Elliot, you see she feels she can't be open and honest. And as he says, she's channeling her frustrations in the wrong directions, which ends up being kind of funny and ironic because pot calling the kettle black, obviously, by the end, we find out that Dr. Elliot is channeling his frustrations and anger in a very unhealthy way and in the wrong direction, as he is, spoiler, because this is all about spoilers since it's an older film, because he is Bobby the killer in the film, actually. So, he's giving this advice, but he can't take it. When Kate asks Dr. Elliot if he would sleep with her, he pauses and looks in the mirror before answering. This is an indicator that something is off kind of early on in the film, and notice that this also happens later on in the film when Liz is being bait, basically, to kind of draw out Dr. Elliot, and she asks if he would. Well, I mean, it's even more than just asking. Like, she tries to seduce him, basically. And there is a point where she asks him a very similar question like Kate did, and he does the same thing where he looks in the mirror. Now, this, I think, is supposed to be used to show his duality, basically, of him looking in the mirror, and it's him looking, basically, at Bobby. It's kind of conferring with Bobby, in a sense. You can also view that as the moment that he switches from being Dr. Elliot to being Bobby. Because they talk about that at the end of the film as well, that when the arousal would happen, when a woman would arouse Bobby or Dr. Elliot sexually, Bobby would come to the forefront and basically take over the body as a dominant personality and go on this killing spree. Because Bobby wanted badly to be female and had an affront to the fact that Dr. Elliot was still interested in being a male. And because obviously they say at the end that as Bobby, Dr. Elliot was going to see Dr. Levy about getting reassignment surgery, and starting hormones and then also getting reassignment surgery. So obviously, I mean, I'll address this right now. Obviously, this film is very problematic from a standpoint of now, but you do need to understand that this was done in 1980. Not a whole lot was known about people who were trans, and it was wrong within society at the time, but we've gotten a lot better. And this is one of the reasons that I feel like films like this are still important to be watched, not just from the standpoint of, style and story and stuff like that, but to see how far we've come as a society. And we have come very far. Obviously, we still have a very far way to go, but we still have come pretty far, and that is good progress. And this reminds me of that, at least. So getting back to the events of it, the cat and mouse game that goes on at the art museum is a representation of Kate trying to find what she's looking for in life. Obviously, that being sexual fulfillment. It goes on a bit long. I think the final tally on it is about like a 9-minute kind of cat and mouse scene, although it's done in an artistic, interesting way so that it doesn't feel very boring, in my opinion. Now, obviously, it ends with them getting it on in the cab, and if you note, it's very interesting. When she comes out of the museum and she looks to the cab, the camera pans from her to the cab where the guy is, and he's wearing, the one glove that she had dropped. While it's panning, it passes the killer standing there very quickly, but you notice it going when you're watching. They quickly pan past the killer outside the museum. Oh, yeah, I already said that. Sorry. Ouch. That venereal disease paperwork is a killer. The reveal when Kate is leaving that note for the guy that had slept with, I think his last name was Lockman. I think it was Warren Lockman or something like that. When she finds out, she's like looking for something to write on and write with, and she finds this report from the health department saying, you have a venereal disease. Like, what are the odds? Like, it's such a dagger because it's like, here she is. She's finally expressed herself sexually. She's finally gotten what she wanted, fantasized about. And this thing has just put the kibosh on her happiness. Because you see how happy she is up until that point, and then everything after that is so morose. It's so depressing from what you see from her acting wise. Which, by the way, that acting job is phenomenal. Angie Dickinson did a wonderful job because there's no dialogue at that point. When she gets up from the bed after she's had her tryst to when she gets killed, there's no dialogue from her. She is just emoting with her face and physically acting, and she does a phenomenal job because you can see the turmoil in her mind. You can tell what she's thinking about. You can see the emotion being displayed there. So phenomenal job. Actually, a lot of people of this time were very surprised that she wasn't nominated for any awards for that role. I mean, she did a phenomenal job. Kate's death in the elevator is brutal and also super stylish. So it's this really cool thing where De Palma makes it look so good and so appealing, but it's so horrific and so brutal at the same time. Once again, going back to that whole duality thing that I was talking about. There's a lot of that kind of duality. You have the duality of, Kate and Liz, which you could argue are basically the same person, could exist in the same body, much like Dr. Elliot and Bobby. And then you have this brutality and beauty slash stylish death scene. It's a theme that just goes throughout the film. The voicemail Dr. Elliot plays from Bobby is a strong red herring, especially initially. Very effective at keeping suspicion off of Elliot, since nobody would assume he would leave himself a message. Now, that is a smart way to write it in, a very good red herring for that reason, because people wouldn't, when you're watching it for the first time, just assume that he's calling himself. Like, that would usually never cross anyone's mind. So that does a really good job of taking focus off of him and being like, oh, this is the killer. It gets close to Dr. Elliot because you think, oh, this is someone who he's treating. But yeah, well done. Elliot's questioning at the police station comes off very differently when you know the ending of the film. You see Elliot getting defensive, and on the first watch, you think he's getting defensive for his patients, but on the second watch, you realize that he's being defensive for personal reasons. Because he knows deep down that he is the killer. He knows what was at play. He knows who Bobby is, even though he acts like he doesn't. And it is this thing that they kind of allude to where Dr. Elliot's not like fully aware of Bobby, so that kind of plays more to the surprise aspect of things when it comes to how the character Dr. Elliot acts throughout the film. But on some level, he knows. And that's why this defensiveness comes out. Detective Marino treats Elliot and Liz very differently. The big reasoning, in my opinion, their professions. Someone who is a psychologist is thought of a lot more than someone who is a sex worker. And that's another area where we've come a long way as a society, but have a very long way to go. I feel like right now we're really just starting the conversation about sex work and not, demonizing sex work as an actual legitimate means of income. So, yeah, but you see that was a thing. I mean, it's kind of not kind of, it is still a thing where police officers will basically treat these people very differently. And it's interesting in this instance, especially because, well, I should take that back. I can't just assume that police officers nowadays will definitely treat people differently, but I'm sure there are ones who do. I'm sure there are ones who don't as well. So I'm not going to make that generalization, I'll say. So, but it is so interesting to see that they're treated so differently when, after you've already seen the film, you already know the end of it. One of them is clearly innocent and one of them is clearly not. And the one who's the killer in the end is the one who's treated better of the two. It's crazy. The other one's just a traumatized, um, I don't know, I was going to say victim, would-be victim, but a traumatized witness to a murder. Not treated well. The detective work of Kate's son, Peter, is shot in very cool ways, and the use of tech makes it more fun. Also, really cool how they use a split screen in that, where you see like a stopwatch when he's timing people coming out of, I believe, Dr. Elliot's office. That was pretty cool. But like all the tech stuff and the whole process of Peter going through his own investigation, very interesting, very well shot. When you're hearing Bobby talking while Elliot is shown, it's actually in his head when you think he's just remembering a conversation. And the split screen with Liz is great at the same time. Because once again, you know, you're showing the person who's witnessed the murder and you're showing the actual killer, but at that point you're not supposed to really know. But the fact that you can see what both of them are doing at that time is very interesting. And if you're focused only on what Liz is up to, she's focusing on her work. She's kind of like lining up work for, it seemed like the next day or week. And then on the other side, you have Dr. Elliot, who's kind of thinking about, you know, hearing what Bobby's saying to him, and then he's watching this Donahue show about someone who is trans. And it's giving you those clues if you would pay a lot of attention there. Nice tension increase when you briefly see the killer hop on the train that Liz gets on. I really like that. Like, the tension really does go up because you're like, oh no, the killer is now on the train, and Liz didn't see the killer slip on because she gets distracted by the guys who are hassling her within the subway. So that was interesting. And then a nice kind of Peter pops out of nowhere to save Liz, and then they start working together. So I like that partnership then, where they're working together. And it's a nice surprise, especially because he uses homemade mace. I thought that was really interesting. Dr. Elliot's heated conversation with Dr. Levy seems to strengthen the theory that it's this Bobby person who's the killer, but the way the psychologist reacts, there is something else going on. You can see in his facial expression, especially after the conversation's over and Dr. Elliot leaves, that there's something that he feels off. He feels off about the conversation. He feels slightly confused. And that's kind of another one of those little indicators that there's something not right. And obviously that's what leads Levy to go to the police. And then they set up this whole thing where Liz is the bait for the police. When Liz asks Elliot if he's attracted to her, he looks in the mirror again, like he did with Kate. Just reiterating that. That's an important thing. The events leading to Elliot being shot and revealed as the killer is a bit confusing because of Betty showing up out of nowhere. She was the police officer who they had staked out there to watch Liz. Since she hasn't been seen before and grabs Peter, you end up being focused on that situation going on outside of the house, which diminishes the impact of what you're seeing going on between Liz and Dr. Elliot. Because that happens first, and you're confused to who is this, and Peter's in danger, it's hard to focus on what you should be really focusing on, which is the big reveal. So this is one of my biggest issues with the film, is that is set up in such a bad, confusing way that it diminishes the experience of the film, for me personally. So that's one thing I would definitely dock this film points for. That should have been handled in a different way, in my opinion. Dr. Levy's explanation of Elliot is basically split personality, but with a trans focus. It shows how off-base theories back then were and how far we've come. I know I already talked about that, but that does bear repeating. We've come a very far way, a very long way. But like I said, we have very, very far to go. Very far to go. Liz and Peter's conversation at the cafe is funny because of how uncomfortable it makes the older lady at the table behind them. I thought that was funny. I mean, really the whole time I was just watching that woman's facial reactions because she was so uncomfortable. And it's funny, but it speaks to one of the issues in our society where people get very uncomfortable when they're talking about sex. And I think that's one of the key points about this film, which is, why are we so hung up on sexuality? You know, it's Kate who doesn't want to talk about sexuality. She doesn't want to be who she is sexually because she's afraid of how she'll be perceived. She's afraid of how that will impact her marriage. versus Liz, on the other hand, who's not taken very seriously, who the cops treat like she's a suspect, basically, because of her line of work, because she is, living out loud as someone who's a sex worker, and she embraces her sexuality and she's using it as a living. Very interesting. Elliot strangling the nurse is way too easy to see coming. Yeah, that was telegraphed way too much. I also think that scene probably should have been cut down some. I don't really think it had the impact they were looking for. There are a few scenes that I think could have been cut down some, but overall, it moves pretty well, and it's like an hour and a half, hour and 36 minutes or so. I don't really like that the ending is a dream, but it does show the degree of trauma that Liz basically lives with now. So it's good to show that aspect of it, but I hate the whole trope in films, especially horror films, where it's like, oh, and this was a dream. It's great because the whole movie didn't end up just being a dream, just that portion at the end. I just don't, I don't know. I'm kind of in between on it because, like, I see the point of it and it was well done, but the whole dream thing always just makes me roll my eyes. I don't know if you're the same. It does that for me. So the score is insanely over the top with this film. That's another problem I have with it now. I understand this was kind of more common for its time, so I'm not like gonna harp on that, but it's something that bothers me how heavy-handed the score is with the film. De Palma does plenty of shots of one character in the foreground and one to the side in the background. He did this a lot in Carrie. It's just a thing he really likes to do. It's a stylistic thing of his. And actually, it showed up a good amount in the recent James Wan film *Malignant*, so that he was very inspired by Brian De Palma for doing those particular shots. They look cool. They're very interesting. It's a very interesting visual perspective for getting two characters in the same screen. And I think that it could also kind of play with power dynamics of like putting the one person in the front who's more in control of the situation than the person in the back. I'd have to go back and kind of analyze that, but that's kind of like a off the top of my head thought on that one. Plenty of zooms in this film, like a lot of giallo films, big on zooms. But the big thing here is they're not like harsh, like fast zooms like a lot of old Italian giallo would do. They're very smooth and slow, but they're there. They're definitely there. That's another thing that James Wan did in *Malignant* as well. He adopted the giallo zooms, but the Brian De Palma version of giallo zooms, where it's smooth and elegant, basically, for lack of a better term. All right, so where there are two sides to Dr. Elliot within himself, similarly, Kate and Liz present as two sides of the same person. Liz is the liberated version of Kate in this film, and I think that is one of the big points of this film. It's duality. It is all about duality, and there's duality to everyone. There really is duality to everyone. It speaks to the whole I feel this way, but I also feel this way aspect of humanity, to be honest. And for that reason, I think that, as a society, we need to get away from everything being either this or that, and understanding that a lot of the times it's the space in between those 2 points. People feel mixed feelings about things, and people feel conflicted as well. Just like Kate in this film, Liz doesn't feel conflicted about who she is and what she does, but Kate very much does, because she wants to be more like Liz. Although when she finally does something like that, she takes that leap, it's like she's karmically punished by some horrible deity with potentially with a venereal disease. So anyway, really did enjoy this film. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm gonna give it a very solid 4-star rating for Dress to Kill. I'm glad I own this. I will definitely watch it again. I think I'm gonna have my wife watch it, because I don't think she'll see the ending coming. Oh, that's another thing. I knew what the ending was when I was watching this, because since it's from 1980, it's been talked about in like documentaries and stuff like that before. So it's been spoiled for me. So when I was watching it, I knew how the ending was. So I was a little unhappy with the fact that that had been spoiled for me. That kind of sucks. So I would love to have my wife watch this, because I know she won't see the ending coming, and I just kind of want to get her reaction to it. So live vicariously through her in a sense. But anyway, put your comments down there. What are your thoughts on Dress to Kill? Also, other giallo films you definitely think I should be checking out. And if you are big into giallo, you want some more of my giallo reviews, I have an entire playlist on my channel for giallo films. I'm well over 50 of those reviews at this point, probably around 60 soon. But anyway, like I said, comments. Do me a favor though, hit subscribe. If you have not subscribed yet, please consider doing so because it is quick, painless, costs you nothing, and keeps me motivated. It is your way to pay me back. If you like what I'm doing with this channel, please subscribe because that's the way I know that you like it. But anyway, thanks for taking your time to check this out regardless. And until next time, oh, excuse me, I hiccuped. And until next time, keep it brutal.